Suomen pariin. Nyt kauan kaivattua ASMR-videoa kautta jaksoa. Riippuu kuunteletko vai katsotko tätä. Nyt ajattelin lukea teille Stan Lee, The Man Behind Marvel -kirjaa. Kirjoittajana Bob Batchelor. Kirja on englanninkielinen kirja. Se on Stan Leen Elämänkerta. Ja nyt ajattelin lukea tätä teille. Ja koska ASMR on se juttu, kaikki sitä haluaa, niin tehdään tästä tällainen bonus ASMR-jakso. Luetaan. Kirja. Noniin. Se alkaa kohdasta Acknowledgements. Stan Lee, the man behind Marvel, is the product of a lifetime of reading, researching and studying comic books and contemporary American popular culture. I taught myself to read so that I could unlock the choice of Spider-Man and the Avengers. Then later I grew obsessed with the reality-bending What If series. I do not remember a time without Stan Lee, and the Stan Lee Presents banner in ever present in my mind's eye. I never could have written Stan Lee, the man behind Marvel, without a great deal of help, support and friendship. First and foremost, my thanks to Stephen, Ryan, senior editor at Roman at Littlefield. We are co-conspirators, co-creators, and more or less co-authors of this book. His wisdom and way with words made this a better book. Perhaps some of Stan's alliterative flourishes are rubbing off on me. I would also like to thank everyone who had a hand in this book at R&L, including the design team for its work on the book cover, the copy editors, the marketing team, and the product staff. First rate, one and all. Thoroughly grounded in multi-archival research, Stan Lee would not exist in its present form without the wonderful libraries and archives that bring Lee's career and accomplishments to life. My deepest appreciations goes to the American Heritage Center, AHC, and the University of Wyoming. House Lee's papers got to Laramie, Wyoming, in itself a great story. That AHC staff, led by director Bridget J. Burke, is professional and overwhelmingly helpful and gracious. In particular, I would like to thank Amanda Stowe, who welcomed me to the library and provided keen insight, and most notably John Wecker, who provided immense help navigating the papers and photographs, as well as served as a kind guide to all things Laramie. I would also like to extend my hearty thanks to Jenny Robb and the wonderful team at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum at the Ohio State University. Materials at the library were essential in completing the book, and the museum exhibits gave the research a pleasant respite during long stretches of research. Additional comic book resources, including rare books and Marvel materials, were hunted down at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, the Stowe Monroe Falls Public Library, the Lane Public Library in Oxford, Ohio, and the King Library at Miami University, and via its vast interlibrary loan consortium. Finally, I would be utterly remiss if I did not acknowledge Marvel for introducing its digital Marvel Unlimited subscription service. The archive opens up the company's back catalog and enables one to trace Lee's work across the decades. Stan Lee benefits from the insightful analysis I gained from Joe Darowski, Chris Olson and Norma Jones, who read early drafts and provided thoughtful feedback. Of course, the only improvement, the manuscript, any resulting errors are mine alone. Beth Johnson, art director at Matter Creative Group, provided sage advice reading the book cover the art. I am fortunate to have a fantastic group of mentors and friends whom I can turn to when research, writing and editing get through. My deepest thanks to Phil, Lilip Sipiora, Don Grainer, Gary Burns and Gary Hoppenstand. Thank you for being wonderful role models and guides. Many friends overseer along the way. Thomas Heinrich, Chris Birch, Larry Leslie, Kelly Burns, Gene Sasso, Bill Sledzik, Joseph Benson, Jessica Wadlow, Sarah McFarland Taylor, and Heather and Rich Walter and family. I have been lucky to have many fantastic mentors whom I would like to acknowledge. Lawrence S. Kaplan, James A. Keller, Sidney Snyder, Richard Immerman, Peter Agamnani, and the late Anne Byrne. I benefit from the friendship of a group of like-minded popular culture aficionados: Brian Coogan, Brendan Riley, Catherine Turner, Norma and Brett Jones, and Lee Edwards. Thanks to my friend Jason Pettigrew at Alternative Press for his support and timely press pass. I would also like to thank my Miami University colleagues in the media journalism and film department. My family is incredibly supportive, considering what writing books means on one time and energy. Thanks to my parents John and Linda Bowen for everything they do to make our lives infinitely better. Thanks also to Josette Percival and Michelle Valois for their support and many kindness. I cannot express my love and appreciation deeply enough to Suzette and Sophia Roberto. They have brought endless love and laughter. Without Suzette's tenacity, I might have never fulfilled my lifelong dream of meeting Lee. Finally, my daughter Cassie is my inspiration, hope, heart, and joy. I can't wait to watch her writing life unfold. I am blessed to have such a wonderful daughter. Prologue. Dawn of the Fantastic. Stan, we're gotta put out a bunch of heroes. You know, there's a market for it. Timely Comics publisher Martin Goodman barked at his editor Stan Lee. When he sensed a trend in the making, Goodman wasn't shy. His eye lit up with a touch of cash register across the country, ringing up children's dimes. Those coins would eventually roll into his pockets. He could practically hear those tin dimes hit the cash box. Goodman's feeling didn't come from divine inspiration of a lucky punch. A much more practical business leader, he didn't work that way. Instead, reportedly, after golfing with some fellow executives who happened to run the distribution arm of his main rival, National Periodical Publications, later simply known as DC, the home of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Goodman listened in as they bragged about a new line of comic books that were selling fast. In particular, they couldn't stop when it came to new superhero team that would be getting its own title later in the year. Never willing to let a little bit of competitive intelligence slide, Goodman jumped at the news. Returning to the office, he squawked in Lee's ear about creating a new superhero team to match DC Comics, and on the double. Little did Goodman know, however, that his longtime editor had been suffering from bouts of frustration and despair. Lee could not stomach working in comics any longer. He warred with the idea of chucking a 20-year career regardless of bringing home the steady paycheck at Goodman's mediocrity dispensed. "We're writing nonsense, writing trash," he told his wife Joan. "I want to quit," he confided. "After all these years, I'm not getting anywhere. It's a stupid business from grown up to be in." Lee had spent decades of his adult life putting out a variety of books that most adults scorned, from silly animal stories to war and romance tales. He had worked alongside Joe Simon and Jack Kirby on the early superhero titles, but they dropped in popularity. The constant flurry of work against tight deadlines and Goodman's follow the leader management philosophy became too much to handle. Lee prepped for the leap into something else, anything else, just not comic books. Glum and exhausted, Lee arrived at home in Long Island after a tiring day at the Madison Avenue office. Gripped by stress and more than little anxiety, he contemplated alternative careers but wasn't sure which way to turn. What if he couldn't support his family? What would he do? He told Joan about Goodman's urgent directive and asked her advice. "If you're going to quit anyway, why don't you do a book the way you'd like to do it and get it out of your system?" she said. "Worst that will happen is that he'll fire you and you want to quit anyway." Lee's life's work hung in the balance. A career that had already spanned more than 2 decades. It had provided them with a nice home on Long Island, and money was never scarce, unlike his rough early years when his own father faced chronic unemployment. Fear and desperation can be great motivators. Lee listened to his wife's thoughtful words. After all, Joanne was his best friend and closest confidant. On the verge of giving up and frustrated, he reached a breaking point. Maybe, just maybe, if he took a chance, the job would get better and he could break the spell of monotony. Lee realized that he had no choice. Although unsure about what the future held and concerned the leaving the job might spell financial doom, Johnny's support and approval gave Lee the boost of confidence and the needed. He would make a last-ditch effort, a final go to the career he had stumbled into as young high school graduate just looking for steady paycheck. Lee decided then and there to follow Goodman's advice to a point. He would create an original superhero team, one that he consorted not based on Goodman's typical retreat of whatever DC or one of other comic book companies put out. Lee's boss has even suggested that ridiculous name for the new team, the Ridiculous League. Lee saw that idea as yet another in long list of uninspiring copies of popular DC titles. No, Lee thought, these heroes would be more based in reality. This was the chance to do all the things I would enjoy, he said, to the character who act like real people, to try to be more imaginative, to make some stories have happy endings and some not, to continue the story and set them in the real world. Lee decided to risk it all. Consequences be damned. Whatever happened, he hoped that creating a comic that he would wanted to read would bring the joy back into his work, life and appeal to fans. He started stretching out the new team right away. I forgot about the publisher. I was off and running. I was going to have fun, Lee explained. It was very easy for me to control, since I was writing virtually all of them. I could keep them in style I wanted. I was creating my own universe. Giving himself the latitude to the change and has been as creative as possible, Lee took up the challenge to create a team such as comicdom had never known. He realized that this was go for broke moment in his life. Just this once, he thought, I would do the type of story I myself would enjoy reading if I were a comic book reader. Johnny's words still rang in his ear. You could dream up plots that have more depth and substance to them, and create characters who have interesting personalities, who speak like real people. Her words gave him the impetus to go all out. After years of churning out monster comics and suspense-filled science fiction titles, Lee drew on what he knew. The new superhero team would contain elements drawn from across popular culture, not only science fiction stories and popular P-movies, but also the real-life Cold War tension with the Soviet Union over space flight and nuclear weapons. The first vibe Lee took at the traditional superhero was with Reed Richards, the team leader. Rather than make him muscle-bound and overtly handsome with astronaut good looks, Richard would be thin, brilliant scientist who liked to show off his smarts. Next, Lee needed a female lead. She wouldn't be the typical weak girlfriend merely waiting for the man to finish saving Earth. Sue Storm was a full member of the team, not merely pinning away for a masked hero. As a matter of fact, he thought, I was utterly determined to have a superhero series without any secret identities. Lee figured that if he were a hero, he would want the world to know it. I'd never keep it secret, he explained. I'm too much of a show-off. Once he had the two main characters, Lee decided to turn the genre into its ear again. He needed two more characters to keep the banter even. One would be a hot-headed teenager. Rather than make him a teen sidekick, which had always been the case in comic book history, Lee created Johnny Storm, Sue's little brother and certain central member with enough firepower to stand on his own. Having a brother and sister would add additional tension. Finally, the team needed muscle. Lee brought up a board around and tumble blue-collar strongman named Ben Grimm. The battle between brains and brawns played out with Grimm juxtaposed to Richards, the brilliant scientific leader. The scenario created tension, enabling readers to compare the two and possibly even forcing them to take sides. Doodling on a pad, scratching out dots in his lefty scrawl, Lee crossed out plot ideas and potential character over and over again, realizing that the story would not be driven solely by action, like a typical comic book for children as young readers. Instead, he focused on the interaction between the teammates, similar to how families got along and people worked in real life. I want to think of them as real, living, breathing people whose personal relationship would be of interest to the readers and equally important to me. Lee also aimed at an older audience, believing that if readers could relate to the superheroes as people, then they would enjoy the book. Television and film were certainly skewing towards the teen and young adult audience, so Lee would aim there too. Now all the team needed was a way to gain superpowers. Once again, Lee thought about the Cold War tension over atomic weapons. The possibility of nuclear annihilation terrified the public, so it grew into a mainstay plot twist for stories and films. Lee's team ventured into space in an experimental rocket. When the craft crashed back to Earth, the crew was exposed to comic rays, giving them superpowers, but simultaneously nearly scaring them to death. Almost instantly, they realized that they had to combine forces for the good of mankind. Sticking to the alliteration that he liked so much, Lee named his band of misfits the Fantastic Four. In short order, they would not only save Earth and universe on countless occasions, but save Stan Lee's career and change American culture forever.